You have been shot. You have stabbed someone.
Yeah.
You have sold illegal Class A drugs.
I would say it's a chain of events that led me into that direction. And every day I started to go home and started to feel a bit suicidal. And I'm at that level of like breaking point. People around me, obviously as I'm now older, they prey on young people who are vulnerable. I've got all this success motivation in me, but they're just seeing this opportunity to
use you. Sounds like you're being groomed by the older kids.
At first, I was thinking, is this my last breath, my last seconds?
Was there a bullet inside you?
I don't know. I've never been to the hospital for it.
Hello, I'm Victoria Derbyshire, and this is Unbelievable Britain. Real stories told by the people who live them. Divine Ampofo grew up in East London, was pulled into a world where violence, fear, and survival shaped his everyday life. He was shot at as a teenager, sold drugs, and could have ended up in jail for life. How he stepped away from all that is the story he's here to tell today. Hello, Divine. Now, I'm going to get straight to it.
Sure.
You have been shot. You have stabbed someone.
Yeah.
You have sold illegal Class A drugs, all as a teenager. How does a child end up involved in all that?
I would say it's a chain of events that led me into that direction. I would say some of the motivating factors were a sense of wanting to be something of some level of substance, which I will go into some detail. There were motivating factors, some economical potential was a definite motivating factors. But a lot of the time, it's just a knock-on effect, like a domino effect from one perspective that leads you into another, and then it just spirals just to how we have wars today and why our government's doing what they do.
Yeah.
I mean,
so one thing leads to another.
Yeah.
But you wanted to be someone.
Yeah.
And you wanted to make some money.
The environment I was in and my understanding and the motivating sort of influences around me shaped who I was at the time. And my most motivating factor was always wanting to be something and make something of myself, and I guess be heard and, just have some level of power and influence.
You were shot as a teenager.
Yeah.
How old were you?
16 at the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is it like to be shot?
You know, like when you go to the dentist and you have a really sore tooth and you get an injection and it becomes numb and you can't feel anything. The environment and the time, how I felt, I was like that as a human. I was so numb because of the whole build up to that time. You don't realize how valuable your life is, and in some respects, you devalue yourself to a degree. So even when I look back now, I think about all the crazy things I've been through. I think, how could I have put myself in there? I'll have anxiety even thinking about it. That's the best way to explain. You become numb but then it's like when you start to have that realization, it's just like having anesthetic wearing off, and then you can start feeling the pain.
I mean, you said there's like one choice leads to another choice, leads to another choice, and that's how you end up going down the wrong path.
Yeah.
Let's talk about when you moved to Ghana, because you were a small child, the family go there.
Yeah.
Your early life there, was that happy?
Very happy. So, I was fortunate that my dad was a successful businessman. So we lived in sort of like the prime parts of Ghana. And although at the time it wasn't as developed as it is now, there was a strong level of freedom, like what I remember growing up. I was moved over there. Part of some of the highlights I remembered was, we were well-to-do. We lived in a big house, like huge mansion sort of environment. I had my own personal driver that used to take us to school.
Wow.
And that's back then. I was doing horse riding, French lessons. And I remember when I came and I would tell people. This is like a film. Literally. So and my dad was quite, he did quite well from Christmas. He would buy huge fireworks, and all our family will come from all over the world, all the diasporas, and we'll do fireworks. And it was I felt like a little prince, to be honest. You know what I mean? So it was a real big shock change coming back to the UK, filled with all this confidence, empowerment. It was like going from 100 to 0. Right. And that in itself was part of the journey of the psychological sort of challenges that started off. So my first thing was asking my mum, like, why? Because all I remember is we're in a big house. I've got all this. Then we've come and we're in this sort of boxed room.
Right.
We've had to come and sort of. At the time when we arrived, we were supposed to stay with family. As I'm older now, I get the logic from my family because nevertheless, UK is a very well-developed country. And I could imagine, especially to do with education and healthcare and stuff like that. But as a child, those things don't mean nothing to you.
No. You just think, where's my personal driver?
Like anything I want, like I can have it. I know that anywhere I go, it's like I feel important, you know, and there's a sense of a value. Do you know what I mean? And then you come here and it's like you feel so devalued just by, you know, how people are looking at you. Those times racism was still there, and the funny part was a lot of it was with the other black communities that were, because obviously I was British, but I've been there now, so I've got African accent. I'm more sort of African, and then being mocked for being an African. Do you know what I mean? Rapidly, I realized that I didn't feel, even if like just the journey, coming on a plane, warm climate, everything. My first impression coming off the plane, feeling this real aggressive cold. And then I remember we got to the airport and my mum had one of our relatives were supposed to pick us up and sort of house us. And when we arrived, I think they got it mistaken for my mum was only coming. She wasn't coming with the whole family. So they said they couldn't assist stuff. So we were basically practically half stranded in the airport. She's trying to make calls. And that was the first time I saw my mum have this sort of frantic look on her face. And it made me feel something I had never felt before, because up until that point, I always felt warm, safe. My mum always had this confident look in her face. And then all of a sudden it's like, they didn't really explain to us as well. So I'm still confused. I'm thinking, why have we come here? It's cold. I can't see the benefit of being here. We finally got to a family member's house, and I remember, I think because it was short notice, they said they'll put us up. And the day we got to the door, when she opened the door, there was just this, I don't know if you've ever walked in a room and you just feel like you're not welcome, then you can just feel off. So that was the initial reaction I felt when the family received us in. And I remember my two little cousins were so fuming and angry that who are these strangers coming in our house sort of things. And they ushered us into our room, and it was a small boxed room. And it was like, this is all we can do. And at that point, it looked like a prison to me, because that would be our storeroom back home. So I'm now confused, exhausted, angry, scared. I've got all these emotions going me, and no one's helping to navigate them through me. So already I'm having all this psychological warfare happening at such a young age.
Maelstrom.
And there is no explanation for it. Do you know what I mean?
Can you remember the first time, I suppose, when you were pulled or felt pulled towards the street?
I would say it started off when I was in a sort of like year 5 in school. Up until that point, so when we got back, we finally got integrated and started school. And I used to, as I was explaining, bullied a lot for just being African. And every day I started to go home and started to feel a bit suicidal, because like I had all these emotions and feelings that were not, there was no sort of comfort to it. I'm still angry and annoyed with my mum from bringing me here in the first place. And then I'm going to school and it feels like hell, and there doesn't seem to be no way out. Do you know what I mean? So at this point, I don't even want to go to school anymore. And I'm at that level of like breaking point. And I remember there was a particular boy in school, and he just kept, essentially trying to bully me, And I'm a big guy. And as I said, I was full of self-confidence. So I've got all this inner sort of like, I know who I am. But then when you're in such an environment over oppressing you of being like you're nothing, it's so overwhelming to maintain that level of confidence. Do you know what I mean? So I guess there was a time I went to school and I think enough was enough. And sorry, it was me and my older brother, so we were 2 years apart. And he was going through this similar experience. And at the time, there was this sort of like the biggest bully in school, and he's a bit bigger than me as well, my brother. And I think he was also troubling him, and he just had enough. And then he knocked it, like he must have knocked him out. And that day...
Your brother hit the bully?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that day when he beat him up, I just remembered going to school, and then all of a sudden, people was walking up to me, oh, you're so-and-so's brother. I'm like, yeah. Oh, like you can hang with us now, you're cool. And that was the first time I felt a bit of joy again.
Wow.
So imagine through violence is where I felt now belonged, because it's like now people are showing me a different...
Yeah, a bit of respect.
Respect. And then so I realized, okay, so that's what you have to do to now feel like you're going to belong, you know? So automatically, it just made me feel like I have to follow that path, and I was motivated by it. So anyone would like say anything wrong to me, I'm ready to react. And as I said, because I was already at breaking point, I was ready to do whatever it takes to sort of, so then that led me down this career now of being violent, and then that then simultaneously was now the decline of me being an innocent child, and also actually focusing on important things in school, because now I'm just motivated to show that I can be the best at this just to belong.
Right.
But the motivating factor is just wanting to belong and just not being bullied anymore.
Understood.
Do you know what I mean?
So what is the street? What's going on the street?
But when I would go to school, after school, I would see like my friends being picked up in nice cars. When I would get to go to their houses, I would see like on holidays, they're all going on like on breaks. They've gone on holidays. They had their own room. They had Xbox. So although now I felt confident and like I had friends, I still saw this differentiation from me, again, motivating, trying to still have that belong. There was a time I went to school and I was wearing these trainers called high techs, and they had like 4 stripes. And when I went to school, I was mocked for them. But even though I had now respect and everything, I was mocked for what I was wearing. So I think I started to connect the dots that there are people that live far better off than others, and that's where the motivation of money and the economical motivations came in. By the time I was around 13, I had moved from where we were staying to an estate. Now, there was a breeding ground of so many other young kids who had gone through the same thing I had gone through, so we had that in common. But then what I also realized is on the estate, there were kids and young people that were a bit more older than me that had everything I saw that these other parents and kids, these other kids' parents had.
Like what? Like what?
Like nice cars. So they were like 16, 17. I'm seeing them driving nice cars, and like they're having all these sort of, all the things that when I'm watching movies that make you feel like you are the higher side of society.
You've made it. Yeah.
They're seeing that. So I'm now motivated to, interested in what that's about.
And tell me what the path was that you saw would make you the money.
Okay, so then I realized at that point, got to that point now, my reputation was followed me, right? And
what was your reputation?
For just not taking no nonsense,
right.
Really respected, like anyone chats rubbish to me or anything like that, like, and I saw everywhere it went, it gave me some level of access to. Even though I was young, I could feel it, because with all the other kids, if we went somewhere, if there were older boys, they would just take a liking to me, and I would always never get bullied or, do you get what I'm saying? So I saw a bit of, so when I moved to this estate, the older boys started to like see me as, you know, I guess a potential apprentice. Do you know what I mean? And I saw them as potential mentors and employers. Do you know what I mean? So again, because of that motivating factor, I was now vulnerable without even realizing I'm vulnerable, because I'm motivated. At this point, relationship with my mum's kind of broken down because of, I'm like, well, when I was going through what I was going through, you couldn't help me. I found my own path now. I don't want to hear anything from you now. So there's still a bit of anger as well. Like, you've kind of caused all this, bringing me here, making me, I was just happily living where I was living. You've had to, because I'm so progressive that wherever I am, I'm going to fight through it. So it's like, this is my way of not being just alone, like just the lower side of life. Do you get what I'm saying?
I do.
So, and then obviously these older people around me, obviously as I'm now older, they prey on young people who are vulnerable. I've got all this success motivation in me, but they're just seeing this opportunity to
use you.
Right. So I guess I started to identify how are they making money. Then I was sort of introduced to the actual trade,
which is
of
what?
Selling drugs. You know, at the time was cannabis. You know what I mean? And it was just maths, and I was good at maths. You know, so you can buy 7 grams, you can, you know, make it into 14 wraps, you can make back £140, so you've doubled your money. Do you know what I mean? So it's like stocks and shares, I guess. Do you know what I mean? So I started to understand the trade, and lucky for me, well, lucky and unlucky, but then, you know, I became good at the art of the trading aspect of it. Do you know what I mean? So you started making money. That's what I mean by the domino effect. No one doesn't decide, I'm going to start trying to make money and get into violence and everything else. But now you're stepping into a whole new world. You have no control. It's like dancing with the devil. Once you decide to step in, you can't control any outcomes. It's not like, you know, you got insurance and, you know,
yeah.
So, and then all these other
But you
factors.
probably think, your teenage brain is probably thinking, I'm making an informed choice to step into this because I want to make that money and have those nice possessions. But actually, it sounds like you're being groomed by the older kids.
100%. I mean, that's definitely a motivating factor. But then as well, you got to understand, I can't stress this enough, that why do I want money? Why do I want these things, yeah? Because I'm still a kid, right? And it's the sense of belonging, is that sense of, you know, wanting to be something.
By your late teens, you are making quite serious money.
I would say in my world, I'm very successful.
So how much you make in a week or a month?
So I would say by the age of 16, I could make anything from, like, turnover funds, about 3,000-4,000 a week, you know, profit anything from £1,500 to £2,000.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Selling cannabis?
No, so at that point I had then progressed to other serious drugs. Yeah.
You are an entrepreneur in selling drugs at this point, making a decent amount of money. Who is buying the drugs? Who are you selling the drugs to?
This is so interesting, yeah, because my clientele ranged. I had police officers. That I actually had one that was a police officer. So the partner of the police officer came to me and he was like, oh, my partner's a police officer. And I was like, I was a bit skaky. And we actually became quite good friends and stuff. So I had police officers. I had an Asian community that used to come to me quite a lot. I had a lot of like Eastern Europeans that used to come to me, single parent mums. Used to come to me, young youths that would be in my range. So like it's because that's how I learned so much about life, was the range of different clientele that came to me. You can imagine judges. I had like, these ones were the most interesting to me. That's why I mentioned them. But you name it, all kinds of walks of life. Do you know what I mean?
And was there any part of you ever? Did you ever lie awake at night thinking? Not only am I breaking the law, but I'm selling this stuff to people who may become addicted to it. And in a lot of cases, they can't afford to buy this stuff.
I think now that I'm a lot more older and I understand the world for what it is, you know, I understand each individual, you're responsible. But you could say that about loads of different products, if you be honest.
Yeah, but
you know
these are illegal products. They're class A drugs in some cases.
So I'm addressing the ethical side of it. So in terms of ethically, you know, selling cigarettes is killing people, right? We know what it does, but people are making billions off the back of it. You know what I mean?
Okay, but I'm still going to come back to the point.
Sure.
Cigarettes are legal, whether you like them or not.
So that's the legal side, but I'm first addressing the ethical side.
Sure.
So because you're asking me how do you sleep at night, right? So because you're doing something that's harming others, right? And I'm saying the world is built on that. So if you want to understand that, just take a look at the world around you and understand why is the world designed that way. It's the infrastructure of society, essentially, right? Because it's not designed in a way that we put the welfare of everyone first. They put progression of wealth and growth before human interest.
So are you justifying selling illegal drugs by saying, you know, there are legal companies who sell things that do harm to people, so it was all right what I was doing?
No, so as an individual, that's me assessing it just from a broad. But my personal opinion is obviously that's why I do what I'm doing now. I'm creating up. My journey since I came out of that has been empowering. I understand the power of human value.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. So sorry to keep banging the same drum.
I mean, let's go for it. Yeah.
We know that harm from drugs costs about 20 billion a year in all sorts of ways.
Yeah.
When you look back as a 36-year-old now, as a
Yeah.
mature adult, how do you feel now about you selling drugs back then?
I feel like any direct motivations that intentionally harms people is just a wrong, like ethically and morally, spiritually, on so many levels. It's not just about drugs. It's other things I see around me. In the worlds you're in, we will know what it is. Do you see what I'm saying? So if you're kind of puzzled how people on the lower level are doing that, they're just a small, and I'm not trying to have that conspiracy conversation, but I'm just telling it for what it really is.
You're saying it's a microcosm of what's going on across society.
Do you know what I mean? And I mean, even if we come to like the war aspect and the killings, and I mean, what's going on in the world today? Like, what justifies another country going to bomb another country? If someone's more powerful and they want to take over somewhere, right? It's just like in the streets, right? Violence has always been the way, whether we like it or not. When everything is said and done, violence rules. We've still built a society where violence rules. They're using the same structures.
Framework,
on a lower level.
Understood.
I don't know if that...
Yeah, I do understand it. I don't necessarily agree with your thesis, but I do get what you're saying. So when you're in this world as a teenager, what's going on with your parents?
So at the time, my dad was back home.
Right, he was in Ghana.
And, as I was saying, like, things were starting to not go as well as they could for him. And that left us in a very, very vulnerable position. So especially now that I'm a father and I've just got the one child and, I love her to bits and she's my world. But thinking about a single parent mum who's still sort of like not in her natural habitat with 4 kids, right? Literally borderline poverty. I remember days like, there was even a time that we was collecting pennies to slot the electric. And then I found this guy who had some way of rigging the electric for it to be free. And then my mum was so scared, but we literally don't have no electric. So in a way, I became a half bit of a savior. Right. But she was so worried. And there was one day I had gone and tried to do it myself because it came off and it sparked. And she was so devastated. And I think even to now, it has had a effect. Me and my mum's relationship is one that, it's very, very sensitive to me in a way that, on one hand, I had to be a man so early on. And because my dad wasn't there, my mum, even though it was like, there was a lot of things, because from a very young age, I was very helpful with many things at home. And I could see that she was so torn by her ethics about how she went about things. And
so I want to talk a little bit more about where we started.
Sure.
About the moment when you were shot as a teenager.
Yeah.
Take us back to that moment.
There was a lot going on. I started the journey, as I was explaining, of this entrepreneurship journey. But then as it comes with that territory, there were a lot of people that just were not happy about my success, right? And that started my group. We were always, I think, and I think God bless my mom and my family, that there was always some level of ethics in me that, like, I was never a person that would go around starting trouble or wanting to inflict violence on people or wanting to see people feel harmed or hurt or whatever. But I would definitely protect myself and stand up for myself, right? So when you're in that environment where you've got these things happening in you, people started trying to test me to see if they could. And that led to myself, our group and another group that wasn't as successful financially, but they were more sort of going down the more terror road of like violence and all of that. They thought that they could use that to then, but then we had resources, right? So that ended up with one of them trying to rob one of my friends, and then he retaliated on them, and they came back to retaliate, and unfortunately, I was the one in line for it. And I remember that the day when...
Were you deliberately shot? They wanted to shoot you?
So initially they would have ideally wanted my friend who had retaliated on them. But at the time, it's a group effort. So they got me. And I remembered at the time...
Where were you shot?
I was shot in the side. I'm more than happy to show you the scar after. But this is the interesting thing about how I got shot, and I'll quickly give a quick brief on that. So I remember at the time, we had our own muscle. Yeah, we were on our estate, and then these guys have infiltrated, and they've come like a hitman's come to. So he's come and they saw a younger group. So these guys have gone to the other group and said, "Oh, like where are your elders?" Right? They've frozen, and one showed them where we are, but one's been brave and decided to run off and come and alert us. So when they came to alert us, we were all in a certain section, and when they alerted us, everyone ran one direction, but I knew where our muscle was in another direction, and I had access to it. So I was going to get our protection, and as I was going, I just remembered like walking, like it's like we're in a sort of like an estate, and we're like sort of at the back of the estate, and as I'm walking to sort of like another block of flats, the gentleman just sort of looked to my left, and I saw this sort of guy sort of masked up. And this is the interesting thing about it. I still can't explain this to this day. I've had different theories, but I don't know how. So it was about a distance from, I was about there, they was about there. And I just remembered him pointing out. And I remember just so I'm running like that. And then he sort of lined me up. So I've kind of, and I've been a big guy. I had like a jacket that goes over me. So it doesn't open this way, it's like over. And then I had a t-shirt underneath. But all I remembered was running, and I just heard the bang. But it was so impactful, it kind of shifted me. And then I carried on running. And you know when you've got meat on a fire and it's like
sizzling,
and it's like it becomes a little bit like not rubbery, but it's like, so I just felt like this heat come from there. So I thought I was dead. Like in my mind, I'm dead. And then so as I've made my way to the block, everyone, all my friends, they were a bit distant, but they could hear and they kind of got a glimpse of it. So I remember going into the block, and then I'm feeling, but my jacket, I can't really see no hole in my jacket. So I'm a bit confused, but I could just start feeling like there's a lot of like heat and just. So I remember going upstairs into the block, and then I took my jacket off, but my t-shirt had been ripped, like as if someone's tried to rip it, and like there was like what looked like to say like a wound. Right. Yeah. At first, I was thinking, is this my last breath, my last seconds? And obviously, I could still feel like I was breathing, but I could just feel this really strong kind of stinging pain. So I managed to hold my side. I went home, and this is how crazy I was, like where I was at mentally. Yeah. I thought if I go to the hospital, police are gonna come and they're gonna ask me questions, and and in my mind, obviously I wanted revenge as well. So I was like, I don't want, because I'm watching this movie, like, I feel like I'm this young mafia boy that it's not gonna.
And how old are you? Remind
16,
us.
17.
Oh my God.
So yeah, so I've gone home, and then we had something called injection violet, yeah, and something called, I think, TCP or something. Yeah. So I saw this in the army movies. Yeah, this is no word of a lie. I've put it all together, and and it's just burnt me, and I've held it so deep tight, and I've put this thing called injection violet. But then this is, in my mind, I'm thinking, don't I meant to feel like a bullet or something? So, and this is where maybe, I don't know if some analysts can really one day give me the real answer to this, right? So, because, up to now, I didn't go hospital, right? So I held myself together, but for 3 weeks, yeah, I was literally like paralyzed in bed, right? If you touched me anywhere here, you could literally cripple me. Like, I was in so much pain. If I coughed or like anything like that, I just felt so much pain.
Was there a bullet inside you?
I don't know. I've never been to the hospital for it.
Right now, there might be a bullet inside you.
Some people say there might be a blank, yeah? But then how does a blank do that, right? I remember when I did go to a course, they were saying that there would have probably been an injection in the jacket, but because it's just a pierce, it would have just been a little hole. Yeah. So what I'm thinking of looking for, I wouldn't have been able to see that. Then
that
also,
is crazy.
I kind of bent down, so I'm thinking maybe
it went past you.
Yeah. That's probably the best.
That is the best explanation.
I just see it as divine intervention. That was, I think, the role of me knowing that. And I guess, you know, it's physics, and like it happened. I didn't go hospital. I was paralyzed for like nearly 3 weeks, and then I started to get stronger, and then I could talk. But even like, as I said, if I coughed or moved or anything,
serious pain. My understanding is a week later, you retaliated. Is that right? You went for revenge?
So again, because, it is a long time ago, but respectfully, I would say everything's hypothetical right now. Do you know what I mean? These are serious matters, and...
Is it fair to say someone nearly killed you with that gun and you nearly killed someone else?
I think it's fair to say a lot of violent things happened at the time.
Fair enough.
And I think you make of what you would want to make of it.
Yeah. So that was your first near-death experience?
Yes. And this is the interesting thing as well. You see, up until that point, when you're a kid and you're every day, this was like a normal reoccurring thing in the environment I was in. Like someone was getting stabbed or shot. So it's like, it wasn't like so surprising. We were already, as I said, there was a retaliation. There's already been a lot of violence around, right? But when it never comes to your doorstep, it just kind of seems like this fantasy thing. But the day it comes to your doorstep, I feel like you taste death because you know that I could be dead by
Absolutely.
now. So
you have called the arrest and imprisonment of one of your close friends absolutely pivotal. In what way?
He would come and knock for me first thing in the morning from when I was young all the way, like 8 years, like every single morning he's there. It's like my best friend.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? So taking that away from me, and at the time my older brother had also moved up to a different place, I felt so alone. Do you know what I mean? And, although I had other friends, people around me, I felt really, really alone. But it gave me time to be isolated, to really think.
How close were you to ending up in jail, would you say?
Well, I think when I even look back on my journey, I'm even getting a lot of like sort of some levels of anxiety. Every time I tap in, it's because, as I said, it's like I was so numb at the time. On reflection now, it's so crazy to even... but like every day could have been like the things I was getting involved in and whatever, these were things that could have easily led me in jail for life or minimum 15, 20 years or, do you know what I mean? And because I was so progressive as a young kid at the age of 13, I dived quite deep into like the heavy stuff. Do you know what I mean? If I'm going to do something, I'm going to go all the way. Do you know what I mean? So that's why you'd be thinking at the age of 16, I'm already like sort of, it's like you working for a company and you're now sort of on like management director level now. Do you know what I mean? And so at the age of 17, I'm on like directorship levels.
Right. And when you say progressive, you mean ambitious, I think.
Yeah.
You want to progress.
Yeah. So it's like, I don't like whatever I'm doing, I'm kind of elevating from it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
You're in it and you wanted to get better.
And that was, I think, one thing that maybe also saved me is that like, aside starting to observe just the low frequency of the environment I was in, it was that, I would watch all these movies and I would see all these cartel gangsters and they would always end up in the end, they're dead or in jail, right? So there was always that, I couldn't find out, there was a point I was really looking to see, let me find one who's made it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I couldn't identify with that. So it just shows you how much influential everything around you plays a part, for better or worse, for young people, do you know what I mean?
So you actually moved out of London, away from London.
Yeah.
And that was a time when you say you could basically clear your head.
Literally.
For the first time.
Literally. But two things were happening. Because as I said, it's like the anesthesia was wearing off. So everything I had done or been through, I can feel it now, right? Because I want to take accountability. Like I want to
acknowledge what you've done.
Right?
Yeah.
So I'm having sleepless nights. There's parts of it I'm seeing death. I'm having so many sleeps of me dying from that experience of like near death so much that I'm just having these dreams and it's like someone just came to kill me and like it really bugged me for many years to come, right? It wasn't an easy, I'd have these cold sweats waking up at night. So there was that aspect of it. Then there was also the other aspect of it, like when I decided to move, like turn my life around, I also was letting go of all that lifestyle and that money and that power and that influence and all that sort of stuff that I had developed, right? So you're starting to now get back to a reality of sort of a bit of a nobody, right? Because you can't have the same power and access, you can't have the same influence, you're living on a different time zone in some respect, right? And then it's the reality check of like, you've kind of in many ways, although in that world you're so successful, right? But in the real world you're nothing. Do you know what I mean? So it's coming to a realization and then it's then just how much pain and how much you've contributed to an environment that has caused so much pain to others and yourself, and like how zombified you was. So when I would then go back, I just see everyone as zombies, like, because it's like, why would you go and stand on an estate having to carry a gun because someone might come for you, holding drugs that might put you in jail? You're just literally running into harm, but then saying that you want to protect. It's so cliche, right?
But it's so messed up.
Right.
You can see when you're in it how it makes sense and it's
Yes,
logical.
yes.
And when you're out of it, you're like,
It's so
whoa.
cliche, exactly. So, and then I guess that's all of those things. It was what helped me drive me to, and luckily I met a gentleman who was quite spiritual. He was like a Rastafarian, and I also moved to an area, like I think in Thurrock, where it was really a lot more greenery and trees, and I used to go for these long walks because
This
up
is
until that
Essex.
point, right?
Yeah.
I couldn't even, like, if I went somewhere, I had to either go drive there or take a cab or Uber and literally walk behind me and always carry a weapon or something. So I was never able to be free.
No.
And then, do you get what I'm saying?
I mean, that's really your whole life. You're looking over your shoulder. It's stressful.
It is mental, but again, because you're numb, that's why I try and use that example of, imagine going through a dentist operation, or even an operation without any painkillers, or you know, my partner was just recently had our first baby, and she had to take epidural, and you know, her whole body was, you know, numb, and I could imagine, even then she was in, so I could half see the pain that's coming, but it was half gone. So I could only imagine going through that without that, right? Yeah. So before you become that person in that world, you'd have gone numb, because if you're not numb, how can you logically put yourself in that much level of harm?
Every
you have
day.
to half go numb, right?
Totally. So did you feel like you were giving up stuff, like, you know, the respect, the reputation, the money, the identity, the power, if you like? Were you giving that up?
Yeah.
What did that feel like?
Of course, it was. Yeah. As I said, it was traumatic in many ways, but it was so liberating in other ways. Like, lucky for me, some of my school friends, they took a different path, and they had uni. So lucky for me, I was really in touch with them, and it gave me a lot. By the time I was 19, 20, and I started making that transition, one of them actually moved with me to Essex, and he was so intrigued and so fascinated, and just in some respect felt a bit more credible that he's like, this is who I'm, like, this is who my guy I'm with, right? And he felt so inspired. But in another hand, I'm looking and just feeling so warm and just so like I could just be a kid.
Right.
So I can now be like, I could be a kid again. Like I could just be silly. Like, because remember, when you're that person as well, there's a certain level of, you can't be too silly,
Daft,
right?
yeah. You've got to be
So from a young age, I
bravado
had to
and
grow
macho.
up.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? I missed out on just wanting
Fun.
to just be a kid and just senseless fun, right?
Yeah.
So now I'm having it, and I'm having the time of my word, and that was a way of a therapy as well. Back to when I was young, that feeling I had back in Ghana, it was now here. Before then, it was a full pretense of chasing back that feeling I could never find. So this is what I mean by chasing the wind, or like chasing the tail. So then I realized all of this, right, is just because of a feeling. When I finally got, it was like, this is what I was looking for. And that's why I felt like it made me realize, and that's what even motivated me to start my organization, write a book, and now creating a mental wellness app, because I know how important that if kids can skip that, and you can give them that high of goodness in the right way, they won't be interested in all of this, because it's such a suicidal journey. But you're chasing that dopamine, you're chasing that high that you're never going to get. It's a false pretense. It's not real.
You now speak to young people
Sure,
about what you have experienced in your life.
Yeah.
And the way you speak is absolutely mesmerizing. I mean, your story is incredible. What do they say to you about their hopes and ambitions for life?
Because they, number one, can see the authenticity in what I say, they know that I've really lived it, right? So it's like getting a real life advanced image of what's to come, right? And I think that allows them to open their ears and minds a bit more to me, because when it's coming from someone that's not sometimes had got that lived experience, it's like, what do you know, sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
But because I know it, automatically I say in a way that it's like they're sometimes directly, when I'm talking about my past, they could identify the stages they're at within that, right?
Wow.
So they know, okay, so like even all the way to being bullied in school and starting to get some respect and reputation, they can identify with that. So there was that element of understanding that aspect, and that makes them realize, okay, he's really saying something. And then, I question them even, like, we look at the math side of it, like, let's look at the drug industry and, like, the amount of money, the amount of energy you're putting in. You're working 24 hours, yeah? You just think, like, oh, I'm a kid, I'm getting sent, like, there was this stage of, like, country lines, and you're going to work and I can earn £500 a week just selling these things. But when you do the actual maths, the hours you're putting in, you're better off going to Tesco, because the line's ringing every day. You don't get to sleep. You have to be on it to make sure you're making those sales for whoever. If you lose those products, yeah, if I work for Tesco or one of those companies and I lose something, it's insured. I don't have to worry about covering it. In that world, you have to cover it. You're not getting paid, or you haven't got any policy in place to cover that, right? And you're doing, so when you think about it, you're getting, I think I worked out with them, it's like less than £1 an hour.
What?
You know what I mean?
Definitely not worth it.
Yeah, so when you do the maths, so when you start giving them that reality check, do you know what I mean? And then you look at the pretend, like, you're more than likely going to go to jail. You're more than likely going to be killed. You can't, once you go in, you can't say tap out. I want to come out now.
No.
The other side is not going to listen to that, right? So the reality checks of it really daunts on them. And, some of the programs we've done in Bristol, we like, specifically Bristol, because there was a program we did for, and we were even covered by BBC on that. And the testimonies of the young people, it was overwhelming how many of them wanted to pivot their direction. Do you know what I mean? And that brought a certain warmth, and
I bet.
And this is what I mean by the ethical, like, side. Although I'm still entrepreneur and I want to, there's far other ways, where you can be a force for good.
Totally. When you look at the crime statistics, I'm looking at London in particular.
Yep.
Knife crime numbers are starting to fall in some areas. Homicides are the lowest they've been in London for some time. This is according to the Mayor's office. From your experience, what genuinely works when it comes to reducing violence amongst young people?
I personally think social media has played a major role on keeping young kids busy, right? And it's also created an avenue to create more exposure and reality checks on the worlds that we live in, right? Because there's a lot more education and tools. They've always been there, but they're not provided in a way that resonates with young people.
Yeah.
So, now there's opportunities where young kids are sitting on doing gaming and becoming, millionaires off the back of it. And I think this is a real testament to show you that most people don't do what they're doing because of what they're doing. They're doing it for that feeling I'm speaking of. Do you know what I mean? So I think in some respect, although it's made a whole new world of different crimes and stuff, I think that it's kept quite a lot of young people now busy in just in a different way. I would also say, to some degree, the police force and, some of the work that the mayor's doing in terms of enforcement clearly has had an impact, longer, large sentences, the strategies of tackling particular gang organizations on a lower level and stuff, I think has created a lesser volatile space for this sort of thing to exist more of. So I think some kudos to them as well.
Tell us about Kiss for Life.
Yeah. So Kiss for Life came about off the back of my book, The Elements of Real Success. So as I said, when I came out, as you would call it, the game, or when I moved to Essex and I started to get a bit more realization for myself, when I would go and visit back to my estates, and I just, like, my heart would cry with so many young people, and just not even young people, just the environments of just the low frequency of individuals, like, and their mindsets, yeah. And the only access to the influential information was music at the time that I could identify with. And a lot of the music I felt, had a particular narrative. And I've always been in that, and I'm still in that mode now, that I wanted to show that there is a bit more sort of, that we can be a bit better than this. Do you know what I mean? And so I was reading a book called Rich Dad Poor Dad at the time, and it inspired me. And off the back of that, I was like, I'm going to just document my journey and I'm going to write a book. If any kids really going through this and they want a way out, like I was, they could read my book and my journey and be able to find tools and ways to come out of it. But I remember when I did publish, I started to get quite a lot of like interviews, BBC, LBC, all these, but they were so interested in just the low frequency aspect of it. Do you know what I mean? Like the glorifying gangs, stabbing, X, Y, Z. And of course it was my journey and I was able, but I was so past that even back then of just, because I found it just be low frequency, right? Because I realized, you know, even with media and a lot of places, like, this is what I mean by back to that ethical aspect. Everyone's just trying to get their own piece of like blood from a situation. They've got their own agendas, you know what I mean? That's why I always ask, like, what's the narratives? Because people could be all nice to you, but they've got their own agendas lined up, which is for their own personal progression, right? Doesn't necessarily mean it's about your like wanting to do good for what you're doing. So I realized that I would go on interviews and I'm thinking that this is someone that's come from what I've come from. We can use my voice to help a lot of people. But then a lot of the major media companies I was going to, when I saw it would publish, the narratives for me I felt did no justice for actually giving the right message to young people. It was more of just even keeping me personally in that low frequency and keeping that whole situation. So
just concentrating on that stuff when you were a teenager.
Yeah, do you get what I'm saying?
And not where you went after that.
So I felt kind of betrayed by that and I didn't want to do any more interviews. But then a lot of grassroots picked up my story and wanted to interview me on like local radios and for me to come out, and churches wanted to invite me to talk to their youth and organizations. And then I started going and then I realized that I felt that what I wanted, like what I was, my mission was with my book, I felt like this was it. And there was a point when I did publish I built Kiss for Life. I was reading a lot of comments and like it was so negative that I went back in that depression mode and I saw myself sliding back to that feeling I once had back then. Do you know what I mean? But I was a lot more mature to navigate through it. But I literally, what I know now is I was in a deep depression. Right. Do you know what I mean? And obviously now I'm not making that financial funds because I'm now going a hard way forward, right? And everything's a lot more slow paced, so I'm not living. So I'm having to still navigate through all those sleepless, all those things I've said, plus exposing myself to a bigger audience where I'm now kind of vulnerable in many ways.
Completely.
So at that point, I was like, and I felt like hard done by because I felt the message I wanted to get across, it doesn't seem like it's coming across that way. It just seems more like glorifying and it really had a big toll on me. But I then ended up going to one particular, there was a program that was happening at the time in Battersea. There was a show called Diamond Radio. They invited me to come on and I spoke about my journey and my book. And I remember people started, I don't know how they did it, they called from prisons. I had like convicts calling, crying, saying they had not spoke to their mum in so long. And just listening to my journey and story made them call their mum to just make peace. And like, it was this rush of a feeling I cannot explain. Like, it was like, at that point, I was struggling financially on every single level. But boy, like I was so liberated, man. I'm telling you, man, it felt, and I knew this was my journey.
Right. You have talked about your mental well-being app.
Yeah.
And obviously emotional well-being is absolutely crucial for every single person watching right now.
Yeah.
Why is it so important for you?
When I think about the way we've designed the app, if I had something like that growing up, I think my narrative would have changed so much differently. You know, the tools we've now installed in the app, we've got a community, we've got an AI companion that's designed as a therapist, but also as a friend. And then we've got a progress mood tracker. We have several other features on there. We've got a mindfulness section that gives you different content. And then when I look at even society today, I see so many scenarios and I was like, if they had Genie, life would be different.
Finally, what is the most unbelievable lesson that life has taught you?
That life is unforgiving from the beginning. From the word go. When you think about the reality of it, like, you know, mum and dad had, you know, and then now all these little things are running And unfortunately, if you imagine you were in that community, only one is going to make it. So already you're fighting for survival.
Okay, but this is depressing.
But I mean, for me, because if you understand it from that premise,
Right.
I think that I believe you've got to be a warrior.
Okay.
You have to have a warrior spirit. So if you understand it in that way, you can live through life and live through everything, right? Because if you're not empowered, right, life's not gonna impact. Like, it's unforgiving. So I can choose to be all. It doesn't mean the world's gonna deal with me that way. And if I don't understand that, I'm gonna end up suicidal. I may end up depressed. I may end up with low self-esteem. I may end up feeling like crap that I shouldn't want more out of life because I've been beaten up. That's just the premise of how do you get. But if you understand it in that way,
Yeah.
you get, okay, we're all in this.
Right.
Whatever I'm going through, I'm not the only one. Everyone goes through these things. So let me make what I want to make now and understand it from that premise. So for me, I believe like you've got to be you've got to have a warrior spirit. And the reason why you got to understand why you got to have a warrior, because life is so unforgiving.
Have you ever thought about going into politics? I'm serious. I'm serious.
I mean, it is definitely is something that I think for me right now is creating the framework where I'm empowered and resourced enough to really have a voice in anything. Do you know what I mean? Because without that, even if I did say I want to go into politics, it's, in many ways, you're still a nobody. Like the world is still designed the way it's designed.
Yeah.
But if you are able to make certain impacts and certain milestones and X, Y, Z, then potentially those doors can open up in the future, you know?
Thank you so much, Divine. Thank you very, very much. Thank you for watching. Please do subscribe for more incredible stories from unbelievable Britain.